here's Charlie Kirk. You know, we're getting closer to the election. We don't have anybody kneeling in front of the
for the national anthem.
The national anthem at the moment. We don't have protests going on about policing. So Charlie Kirk has got to do a little bit more of an academic attempt to stir up the...
Looking back in history.
Yeah, looking back. Here is Jeremy Carl, author of The Unprotected Class. Who wants to guess what the unprotected class is in this country? Here is...
just us whites. I mean,
men.
And all of what we've faced in terms of discrimination, right? Like, sometimes there are black people in commercials now.
Me?
I know.
One of the first sentences of the blurb of this book, anti-white racism, undisguised and unembarrassed, is now official policy in America.
Okay.
And we can see this all around us with the idea that if you press 1 or 2, maybe you're speaking Spanish. Or we're increasingly seeing Cialis commercials where it features a black couple.
Interracial couple.
Yes, or an interracial. I mean, but let's let him express some of this.
Relook at how we've enforced civil rights laws. And again, I'm not saying that because I think we need to relitigate the wisdom of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. It was put in at a particular time to solve.
Oh, I've criticized it.
Yeah.
That's I mean, Caldwell's thing.
Yeah, I mean, and Chris Caldwell is a colleague of mine, and I think it's fine to do that. But I think just as a political strategy, I think. If people want to say, hey, there were absolutely real problems that it was addressing, whether you think it did it in the perfect way or not. But we're as far from that time right now.
No, I want to stay on this segment for a moment because it's a fascinating. He is saying for political purposes, I don't want to engage in whether there should have ever been a Civil Rights Act because the implication is to him that there shouldn't have been. That things either weren't that bad or the fixes for this, like, I don't know, guaranteeing the right that you as a black person could not be discriminated against at, let's say, a hotel or a restaurant or, I don't know, on a bus. Or the the Voting Rights Act guaranteed that your vote, you cannot be dispossessed of your vote or disenfranchised. He had problems with it, but he doesn't want to litigate that. He wants to pretend that it's solved everything and there's no racism now. So, which is just more terra firma. In terms of the political argument.
But that's Carl's argument, right? Where
that's Carl's argument.
But Charlie goes farther in terms of basically, I mean, what have his arguments been about the Civil Rights Act? Let me guess, it's process based, or the federal government shouldn't be making these determinations, something to that effect.
Well, I don't know. I've heard him articulate it, although he says right there he has criticized it, and I'm sure he has. I'm sure the part of it is like, hey, if I'm, you cannot force a restaurant to serve black people, and I just know it's going to fail. That restaurant's going to fail anyways. If it doesn't serve black people, of course, we've seen. It's just absurd. They seem to do okay anyways. Prior to that time, oddly enough, but here's the difference. Charlie Kirk has a radio show, and so he has to appeal to just his audience. This guy, Jeremy Carl, is at the Hoover. Is he at the Hoover? Is that where he is at? The Hoover institution, which is a think tank that has to sound like it's somewhat reasonable, and it's just too complicated to argue that the Civil Rights Act was wrong.
We have a big tent over here between people who think apartheid is fine and people think we should maybe do something to not be officially apartheid.
Just to clarify, sorry, that was Jeremy's first stop in the think tank. He's space. He's now at the Claremont Institute.
Oh, well, he's moved on to the full-on theocratic racist. But go ahead.
And Chris Caldwell is a colleague of mine, and I think it's fine to do that. But I think just as a political strategy, I think if people want to say, hey, there were absolutely real problems that it was addressing, whether you think it did it in the perfect way or not. But we're as far from that time right now as they were from the Wright brothers. So there's a lot of things that have changed in American society. We're not worried about people not being served at lunch counters anymore.
Yeah, and the Civil Rights Act, though, let's be clear, created a beast, and that beast has now turned into an anti-white weapon.
Yeah, and that's the reality. And so we just need to fundamentally relook at a lot of our civil rights legal regime. And without that, even though I don't think it's sort of the magic bullet, but I think without that, there's limits to the amount of progress we're going to make.
Let's talk about discourse and dialogue. This topic would have been even more forbidden 4 or 5 years ago, but it's now becoming in more and more mainstream circles. Is that because the problem is becoming worse, or but our side is more courageous to confront it?
I think it's both, Charlie, and I'm going to commend you in particular, and Tucker, and guys like Matt Walsh.
There's like 3 of us.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, you guys are the
You
big
guys
three,
really,
not
I
the
just
only
want to be
ones.
clear what they're saying. We couldn't be this outwardly racist before. But now we can.
Just to put a time code on that, Wired has a piece, How Charlie Kirk Plans to Discredit Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Act. Starts with 2 quotes. In 2015, Kirk called him a hero. In 2022, MLK was a civil rights icon. Now, you could say both of those things and still hate the guy, I guess, because it's objectively true. He's a hero to many people, and he is a civil rights icon. But now Charlie Kirk is saying, things like MLK is awful, he's not a good person. He said one good thing he actually didn't believe, being the... probably don't care about the color of your skin or whatever.
Well, I remember being at that 9/12 rally that Glenn Beck had back in 2000. I don't know when it was, 2008 maybe, or 2009. Mm-hmm. And there was a guy there who was very angry at Glenn Beck for embracing MLK, because MLK was a socialist and whatnot. And I'm like, well, he sort of was, actually.
Kinda,
but you should tell a lot of people that. But it really did take Trump, and then just sort of like people trying to do, how do we do Trump without the racism? And it took them, to be fair, a couple of months to realize, like, we don't. That's not the formula. It's like how do we do soda without sweetness? It turns out you need the sweetness.
Well,
racism was just one tool in Trump's arsenal, but he won because he was synonymous in culture with the rich decider guy.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I do like the idea of the fact that because Charlie Kirk is saying that, maybe we have to be a bit more strategic on abortion. And now, as you would say, Sam, the dog has caught the car. Abortion was what the right pivoted to after the Civil Rights Act. And so now they have to go to a return to form where they can try to galvanize their base based on
Go back.
Right.
Let's see if it works this way.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
More and more mainstream circles. Is that because the problem is becoming worse, or but our side is more courageous to confront it?
I think it's both, Charlie, and I'm going to commend you in particular, and Tucker, and guys like Matt Walsh.
Go ahead.
There's like 3 of us.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, you guys are the big 3, but not the only ones, but definitely
that have something to lose.
the big 3 who've really come out and talked about this. So I think it's been a combination of things are getting worse, and that's actually put pressure. And then we've had a few folks like you who have been willing to speak forward, and I'm really appreciative, or have people like me on the show just to discuss.
It's a no-brainer. This is not controversial to me. This is real. I know it. We live through it every single day.
Right. Well, it helps because you're spending so much time with young people, Charlie.
Yes.
So you see it. You see it in a way that some of the older people.
Well, and I
don't.
want to also say, again, the liberal media is not going to cover all this, but if you have unapologetic, ferocious anti-white racism, then young whites are going to find some very radical political positions.
Right.
And I don't want that.
Oh, wait, pause it for a second. So wait a second. So am I to understand that all of this anti-white racism is really just is forcing all of the white young people to become virulent racists themselves? And I mean, I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt, and I want to make it clear, I have not read this guy's book. And I probably will not read this
book
book.
him.
But the unprotected class, maybe we should actually.
That would be funny.
Yeah, I guess I would have to read the book, but supposedly, just if I'm to take it from the title anyways, the unprotected class, as a class of people, they have no protection within the context of society. And ostensibly, probably from the government, right? I mean, you don't have class, you do not get class protection except from government and laws. If you're a member of this class, then you get this protection from, let's say, you can't be discriminated against, et cetera, et cetera. But Charlie Kirk is just saying, well, this is just a function of like some people who don't like white people, and that's what's causing all of the racists on the white side.
I mean, do you think that racists in this country saw the Civil Rights Act and then it galvanized them in a certain direction towards extremism? I didn't.
The libs had to get so pushy about
I know. It's the same argument every time.
Shoving black people at lunch counters down my throat.
Totally
Exactly.
right. Like with gay people, like I'm fine with whatever they do in private, but if they're holding hands or kissing in public, don't shove it down my throat, or else you're gonna make me hate you. It's look what you made me do.
But he's getting flanked by Nick Fuentes. That's
Right.
what this is basically about.
Yeah, Nick Fuentes showed up at one of those things years ago, and Charlie Kirk tried to go one way, and it didn't work out for him, and so now he's trying to go the other way. Here is continue with this.
Absolutely. I mean, I didn't write this book to de-radicalize people, okay, but I actually think that if people read it, they will understand. If you're a white person and you're like, man, I'm at the end of my rope and I don't know what I'm going to do.
But that's where a lot of the young white men that we speak to on campus, I sometimes have to kind of bring them back into
Yeah.
like free society, like let's calm down, because they say everyone's against us. We need to create our own identity politic group.
Right.
And I actually don't think that's a good idea. I don't think more tribalism is the answer to tribalism, but I see why they believe that.
Pause it for 1 second.
I
Incidentally, if you are looking for a white identity group, there is one. It is called the Republican Party.
Younger campus Republicans.
sympathize with it. The media then says, how dare you sympathize with people that, you know, want to create their own identity group. But can you speak to that, Jeremy? It's like you can only push a group into a corner so much until they kind of say, I'm not going to take it anymore.
Yeah, and I think that's what's happening, and I think that's, you know, you're seeing this ferment, and that's the left kind of loses its mind because they refuse to deal with the consequences of what they've created. I do think that there's an element, in the same way that Martin Luther King Jr., who we talked about before, on the show, but he wasn't, plus or minus, he wasn't a black nationalist in the way that early Malcolm X was. He was trying to organize black people, however, without apology. I think in the same way, like, we've had a lot of area appeals to equal rights, and it sort of hasn't gotten us anywhere. We need to organize people, not in a way to kind of create racial identity politics, but to show that, like, these are the people being discriminated against, so they have to organize against it.
Actively. And it is without a doubt the only group in the country that you're not allowed to say that you're even part of that group.
Right.
All right.
Let alone
Just
that
pause it for
you're being
1 sec.
mistreated.
What would organizing white people look like, right? I mean, you
The
know,
Republican Party.
well, sure, but you could even, if you want to organize it, it's like you could have matching outfits, right? Like, I mean, so people know that you're a part of the same group. Could be matching armbands.
A coordinated step, rather.
Or yeah, even like
What about Fred Perry shirts?
How about maybe race isn't the lines that we decide to organize along? How about maybe instead these young people, I mean, look, maybe some of them are rich kids that are going to be racist, but like join a union, join some of these like anti-imperial causes that are on your campus that you're being told to hate by people like Charlie Kirk. Like, there are other causes than I need to be, because I'm a white man. I do not feel represented by either of these two absolute goobers there. And the idea that these guys are going to give anybody a sort of path to walk in life is depressing.
Well, the fascinating thing is that in every other application, their ideology is all about the individual. In every other application,
good point.
it is all about the individual. It is about, personal responsibility and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, and unions are bad. Any type of activist groups are bad. Environmentalists are bad. Criminal justice reform, bad. Any type of activism outside of responding to the fact that we've gone too far in giving rights to non-white people. Every other notion of communitarianism, of organizing, of activism is bad inherently. In its essence, is bad, unless you're forced into organizing as white people to push back on what's going on here, which is just.
The good news is that Charlie's very bad at it. Charlie's not the dumbest conservative, but he's quite bad at organizing at least college students to his cause.
They failed miserably.
Focused very laser focused on Arizona this last election cycle, and Republican gains with young people was one of the worst in any of the states that Turning Point USA even looked at, if not the worst there. So that's the good news for us, is that he takes a bunch of right-wing billionaire or millionaire cash and doesn't do a ton with it.
Is there any more to this? Let's just hear where these two guys are going.
Right.
Why do you think that is? Is it just that everyone's so afraid of being called a racist? I actually think that simple explanation is the deep one.
Yeah, I think that's right.
People, it's that being called a racist is worse than being called a rapist in American society.
Oh, absolutely. And you'll see even people, who would be considered very, very far to the right, and they will disclaim, or they will feel like they've been slandered if that is used against them. And you just need to get over it, because ultimately, if you're being effective in this world right now, you're going to be called a racist by the left, but they don't even know what a woman is. So how would they know what a racist is?
That's right. I get called racist every day. And it's easy to say, why are you so terrified of being called a racist? Yeah. But there are huge consequences for being called a racist.
Of course.
Unless you have your own stuff, and unless you're very unique and you're willing to punch through it and punch through it and punch through it and punch through it. And then you come to the other side and you have intellectual purity and freedom. But that's a small group.
Incidentally, I'll tell you what that area is. It's when your audience is also equally as racist, and they're okay with it, and everybody has punched through it.
I know, right? Like they got over the initial shame of being called a racist and just set in the reality that they are racist.
I like the fact too that this guy was feeling loose enough to just slide off topic a little bit in terms of the only unprotected class that's out there to slag trans people.
They pedal to that.
Yeah, it's like it is the white people who are oppressed, and of course those people who are not trans.
Yeah.
It's funny to have like something that you return to as a touchstone for like, oh, this is the truth on our side, and you're wrong about that too. Like,
exactly.
And what strikes me too is these conversations are so boring because they're never specific. It's just like general feelings, general resentment.
100%.
I mean, like they can never point to anything in particular, because also when they start to go down that road, if Charlie wants to get a little bit more specific about his feelings about the Civil Rights Act, then he gets in trouble, because for all of his protestations, right? He knows that there's some lines that he can't cross if he wants to widen his appeal for his audience.
And we should just say the number of racists who are arrested for their racism versus rapists is really out of control.
Imagine like a rapist saying like, yeah, I don't really care if people call me a rapist. Like,
I don't care if people call me a rapist. I just want to make sure they know that like
people care.
I'll rape anybody. Go ahead.
Called a racist.
If I didn't rape anybody, I'd be out of business, because people would be
punch through it.
People would see that like I'm not an equal rapist, and then I would lose all my business. Yeah, so that's the way it works.
Like they've been slandered if that is used against them. And you just need to get over it, because ultimately, if you're being effective in this world right now, you're going to be called a racist by the left, but they don't even know what a woman is. So how would they know what a racist is?
That's right. I get called racist every day. And
pause
it's easy
it. Don't
to say
take it down. Just leave it up there. I just want to repeat the words. If you're being effective in this world, they're going to call you racist. All right? Good.
Are you so terrified of being called a racist? Yeah. But there are huge consequences for being called a racist.
Of course.
Unless you have your own stuff, and unless you're very unique and you're willing to punch through it and punch through it and punch through it and punch through it, and then you come to the other side and you have intellectual purity and freedom. But that's a small group of people
and genetic purity,
because they might have employers and agreements and advertisers, and we have advertisers, and I'm going to talk about one right now. But they're very supportive of the positions we take. So I get it. I get when people are I don't want to say afraid, but cautious.
Cautious about being too racist. Not racist, but, you know, sort of like susceptible to being perceived as a racist.
Yeah, and you can just see this is how they train their audience too, where, you know, certain right wingers like Charlie Kirk will be like, I'll be the brave one to say it. Martin Luther King, not a good guy, right? And then the politicians will go up to certain lines as well, but they right wingers have all these like little wells they can tap into for what they actually want, where they will have like a general understanding of who's on their side, but only some people can say things in public. But we know what they really mean in private too, because that's what we say in private.
Let's go to the IMs. Matt Leck, humorous. Iowa Ryan. It's my birthday tomorrow. My twin brother and I always joke about the bad things that always happen on around that day. Columbine, Oklahoma City, Hitler. Good thing the world is calm now. Anyway, I'm a cannabis grower, and if anybody out there has a good Matt Taibbi impression I could use, a happy birthday. Let's be honest. Emma does the best Taibbi. We already gave Iowa Ryan, I think, the shofar, but happy birthday.
Happy
again.
birthday.
Matt Lex humor aside, Stan 874. What is the link for send Sam to the Crowder discovery hearing? Edwards fan club. Did y'all hear that Manu Shafiq complained about her parents apparently having their land expropriated by Abdel Nasser? Explains a lot why she's such an insufferable coward. I did not hear about that. She's the president. Is it the president of Colombia? Is that it? Mr. Jackpots. I know she's come up a few times recently, but Brianna Wu seems like she's close to completing her pivot to the right by embracing more and more turf shit. I have been aware of that peripherally, and I just honestly like.
I think she's pivoted beneath the need to pay attention to.
I just am not sure why anybody's taking the bait.
Yeah, right.
But
even the
sheer
picture
volume.
retweet, just keep it moving.
Yeah, I think.
Crunchy, happy Friday. I mean, I'm certainly guilty of occasionally taking the bait and probably, but not that often. Crunchy, happy Friday. Do you know what the odds are that a juror is a Trumpist, and how deep background checks investigation go into jury selection by both sides? I imagine there's some of that, but I think for the most part the jury's going to be vetted pretty well. Kowalski, when I turned 30 last fall, my niece said that I was super old now. You can imagine what my son says about me. Charlie Kirk might be more valuable to the left as a well-funded public figure squandering the resources of the right than as a closeted bigot. God gives the hardest battles to his strongest warriors. MLK could never understand how much pressure Charlie is under.